You can't do this! Watch me! Find another way to your clubhouse.
My mailbox wasn't the right shade of Whisper Lake Estates forest green, and for that, the board of directors threatened to seize my home. I thought they were just power-tripping bullies, but when I challenged their authority, I discovered I owned the only road leading to their $1-million clubhouse. I had spent 15 years grinding away in the fluorescent-lit purgatory of corporate IT before I finally decided I'd had enough. I didn't want a mansion, and I certainly didn't want neighbors. I wanted a quiet piece of land where the loudest thing I'd hear was the wind off the water. That's how I ended up buying a dilapidated 1970s A-frame cabin on the edge of Lake Oconee. The property was an absolute steal, mostly because the previous owner, an eccentric old man named Henry Jenkins, had let it fall into severe disrepair over the last decade of his life. After Henry passed, his son Paul just wanted the property off his hands. I paid cash. The deed gave me 5 acres of dense, beautiful North Carolina pine forest, a private dock, and a rustic cabin that needed a new roof and some serious love. For the first month, it was heaven. I spent my days stripping rotted siding, fixing plumbing, and drinking black coffee on my porch while watching the morning mist roll off the lake. I was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just over the tree line. That storm arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a bright white, lifted golf cart. I was up on a ladder, painting the front trim, a deep, forest green, when the golf cart whined up my gravel driveway. 2 people stepped out. The first was a woman in her late 50s, wearing a tennis skirt, a visor, and a smile so tight it looked painful. She was holding a clipboard. Behind her was a man in khaki shorts and a tight polo shirt, trying his absolute hardest to look intimidating with a pair of aviator sunglasses. Excuse me, sir," the woman called out, clapping her hands together as if she were trying to get the attention of a stray dog. I climbed down the ladder, wiping my hands on a rag. "Can I help you?" "I'm Brenda Carmichael," she announced, her tone implying I should recognize the name. "President of the Whisper Lake Estates Homeowners Association. And this is Todd Henderson, our Vice President of Compliance." I frowned. "Nice to meet you. I'm Greg Mitchell. I just bought the Jenkins place." "We know," Brenda said, her eyes darting around my property with visible disgust. "And frankly, Mr. Mitchell, we are incredibly disappointed that you didn't check in with the welcoming committee before commencing exterior modifications. Furthermore, your grass is currently sitting at 4.5 inches, which is 1.5 inches over the neighborhood maximum." She thrust the clipboard toward me. Clipped to it was a thick, glossy binder and a single sheet of paper. "This is your copy of the CC&Rs," she continued, not missing a beat. "And this is your introductory fine ledger. Because the Jenkins estate was in arrears, you owe 3 years of back dues, plus the transfer fee, plus your current fines for unauthorized painting and lawn neglect. The total is $4,200. We expect payment by the 1st of the month." I stared at the paper. Then I looked at Brenda. Then I laughed. I honestly thought it was a joke. "Look, Brenda, I appreciate the welcome, but I'm not in your HOA. Henry's property predates Whisper Lake Estates by about 30 years. Todd puffed out his chest, stepping forward. "Listen here, buddy. The entire lake basin was incorporated into Whisper Lake Estates in 2005. Everyone pays. Everyone plays by the rules. We don't tolerate freeloaders, and we certainly don't tolerate green trim. The approved color palette is on page 42. I have the deed right inside," I said, my patience evaporating. "Tract 42. Unzoned, unrestricted county land. I don't pay dues, and I'll paint my cabin neon pink if the mood strikes me. Now, please get off my property." Brenda's eyes narrowed into absolute slits. The fake smile vanished entirely, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated venom. "You are making a very big mistake, Mr. Mitchell. We have a legal team. We will put a lien on this eyesore so fast your head will spin." "Good luck with that," I told them, turning my back and climbing right back up my ladder. They left, tires spinning in my gravel. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured they would check their plat maps, realize they had no jurisdiction over my parcel, and leave me alone. I was incredibly naive. 3 days later, the certified mail started arriving. The first letter was a formal notice of violation. The second was a notice of intent to lien. By the second week, they were sending me daily citations for everything imaginable. Trash bins visible from the street. I didn't have a street, I had a private driveway. Unauthorized vehicle parked in the driveway. It was my own pickup truck. Failure to install uniform mail receptacle. I ignored them. I filed the letters in a shoebox under my desk. But the harassment didn't stay on paper. Todd Henderson began doing slow drive-bys in his golf cart, pausing at the edge of my property to take photos of me with a telephoto lens. My garbage cans, which I left at the county road junction, were mysteriously knocked over twice. Then, they crossed the line. It was late August. My younger brother, Kevin, had driven up from Atlanta to help me install a new water heater. He arrived late on a Friday night, exhausted from the drive, and parked his Ford F-150 on the grassy shoulder of my driveway, well within my property lines. We had a couple of beers, caught up, and crashed around midnight. At 3 a.m., my dog started going absolutely crazy. I bolted out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and ran onto the porch just in time to see a heavy-duty tow truck dragging Kevin's F-150 down my driveway, flanked by Todd Henderson in his ridiculous golf cart. "Hey!" I screamed, sprinting down the gravel in my bare feet. "Drop the truck! That's private property!" The tow truck driver didn't even slow down. Todd just looked back at me, flashed a smug grin, and offered a little two-finger wave before disappearing into the darkness. I was seeing red. I called the county sheriff's dispatch immediately. A deputy arrived an hour later, looked at the tire tracks in my grass, and sighed deeply. "Mr. Mitchell, I know Brenda and the Whisper Lake Board," the deputy muttered, adjusting his utility belt. "They claim this driveway is part of the community easement, making it subject to their parking enforcement. Since the towing company has the vehicle, it's a civil matter. I can't go arrest them. You're going to have to take it up with a judge." It cost Kevin $450 to get his truck out of the impound lot the next morning. I paid it out of my own pocket, apologizing profusely. Kevin was furious, but I was something beyond furious. I was perfectly cold. They wanted a legal war. They were about to get one. That Monday, I drove into town and walked into the office of Martin Ross, one of the sharpest real estate attorneys in the county. I slammed my shoebox full of HOA citations and the towing receipt onto his mahogany desk. "I need you to destroy these people," I told him, "legally." Martin, a calm man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, spent 2 hours going through my deed, the county tax records, and the HOA's recorded declarations. "You're completely in the right, Greg," Martin said, pushing his glasses up his nose. Tract 42 was explicitly carved out of the original developer's purchase in 1995. Henry Jenkins refused to sell. You are an island in the middle of their subdivision. They have zero legal authority over you. Then I want to sue them for the towing, the harassment, and I want a restraining order against Brenda Carmichael and Todd Henderson. "We can do that," Martin said slowly, tapping a pen against his desk. "But before we file the suit, I want to order a full, comprehensive boundary survey. I want a registered surveyor to mark every single inch of your 5 acres. If we are going to war with Whisper Lake Estates, I want our armor completely bulletproof." I agreed. Martin hired Wayne Miller, a grizzled, no-nonsense surveyor who had been plotting land in the county since the 80s. Wayne and his crew spent 3 days trudging through the dense woods around my cabin, hacking through briars, shooting lasers, and pounding iron pins into the soil. On the 4th day, Wayne called me. His voice sounded strange. "Greg, I need you to come out to the eastern edge of your property," Wayne said. "Right now. Bring Martin if you can get him on the phone." I threw on my boots and hiked half a mile through the woods to the eastern boundary. When I arrived, Wayne was standing next to a bright orange stake driven into the ground. About 20 feet to his left was Whisper Lake Drive, a beautifully paved, tree-lined road that served as the main artery for the HOA. It was the road all the residents used to access the multi-million-dollar clubhouse, the community pool, the private marina, and the tennis courts. "What's wrong, Wayne?" I asked, catching my breath. Wayne pointed down at the orange stake. Then he pointed across the paved road to another orange stake in the woods on the other side. I ran the lines 3 times to be absolutely certain, Wayne said, pulling off his baseball cap and scratching his head. I cross-referenced the original 1,974 county markers. Greg, this road shouldn't be here. I stared at him, not comprehending. What do you mean? Wayne unrolled a large laminated map on the hood of his truck. He traced a finger along a jagged line. When the developers built the clubhouse and the marina in 1998, they needed to connect it to the main highway. The legal easement they bought for the road goes straight through that swamp about a mile north of here. Wayne pointed off into the distance. But building a road through a swamp is incredibly expensive. It requires environmental permits, dredging, tons of gravel. I was starting to understand. My heart began to beat a little faster. So, Wayne continued, it looks like the developers just bypassed the swamp entirely. They paved this road right across the northern tip of Henry Jenkins' property. I checked the county registry. There is no recorded easement, no right-of-way agreement, nothing. It seems Henry just let them do it on a handshake deal because he didn't care about this corner of his woods. Martin Ross, who had just pulled up in his sedan, walked over and looked at the map. A slow, terrifying smile spread across the lawyer's face. Wayne, Martin asked quietly, are you telling me that the sole access road to the Whisper Lake Estates clubhouse and marina sits entirely on Greg's private property? 100%, Wayne confirmed. Nearly 400 yards of their road is on Tract 42. I looked at the pristine black asphalt. I thought about the $4,000 they tried to extort from me. I thought about Kevin's truck being dragged away in the dead of night. I thought about Brenda's smug, venomous face. Martin, I said, my voice eerily calm, if this road is on my private land, and there's no easement, what does that mean? Martin adjusted his glasses. It means, legally speaking, the Whisper Lake Estates Homeowners Association has been trespassing on your property for 20 years. And since you just bought the land free and clear of any encumbrances, it means you own the road. You can do whatever you want with it. I looked at Martin. Can I close it? Martin's smile widened into something genuinely wicked. Greg, it's your driveway. You can put a toll booth on it if you want to. We moved in total secrecy. Martin advised me that if the HOA caught wind of the survey results, they would immediately file for a prescriptive easement, a legal maneuver, claiming they had the right to the road simply because they had used it for so long without permission. To defeat that, I had to physically revoke their access before they filed. I had to assert absolute dominance over my property lines. The timing was perfect. It was the second week of May, Memorial Day weekend. The biggest, busiest, most important weekend of the year for the lake community was just 2 weeks away. The HOA was hosting a massive catering event at the clubhouse, complete with a yacht parade and a fireworks show. I took 2 weeks of vacation time from work. I cashed out a chunk of my $401k. I wasn't just going to block the road. I was going to fortify it. I hired a commercial fencing company from 2 counties over, paying them a premium for a rush job and absolute discretion. They arrived at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday, bringing heavy earth-moving equipment, bags of quick-setting concrete, and steel. Because my property line intersected the road at 2 points where they entered my land and where they exited it, I had the crew install barriers at both ends. On the exit side, closest to the clubhouse, we dropped a line of massive 3-ton concrete jersey barriers straight across the asphalt. On the entrance side, we dug deep holes and sank heavy steel posts filled with concrete. Between those posts, we hung a massive, industrial-grade steel farm gate. Painted bright, unmistakable caution yellow, I welded the hinges shut so it couldn't be unbolted. We wrapped a thick, logging-grade steel chain around the center and secured it with a master lock the size of a grapefruit. Finally, I plastered the gate, the trees, and the concrete barriers with large, reflective signs. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Not an HOA road. We finished the installation by 3 p.m. on Friday, the day the Memorial Day weekend officially kicked off. The fencing crew packed up their trucks and rolled out. I pulled up a lawn chair, cracked open a cold beer, and sat 50 feet inside the gate on my property. I didn't have to wait long. At 3:45 p.m., a convoy of 3 golf carts, heavily laden with coolers, pool noodles, and sunburnt teenagers, came cresting over the hill. The lead cart, driven by a man in a floral shirt, slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt mere inches from the yellow steel gate. The other 2 carts bumped into each other, trying to stop. The man stared at the gate. He stared at the signs. Then he looked through the bars at me, sitting in my lawn chair. "Hey man," he yelled, "what the hell is this? Open the gate. We're trying to get to the marina." I took a sip of my beer. "Can't do it. Private property. Road's closed." "Are you crazy? This is Whisper Lake Drive." "Nope," I replied loudly. "This is Tract 42. You'll have to find another way around." Within 20 minutes, a line of cars, SUVs, and golf carts stretched back up the hill. Horns were blaring. People were getting out of their vehicles, shouting, taking pictures with their phones. It was absolute chaos. Then, the sea of vehicles parted. A silver Lexus SUV barged its way down the grass shoulder, bypassing the line, and screeched to a halt right in front of the gate. The door flew open, and Brenda Carmichael stepped out. She was wearing a nautical-themed blazer, and she was quite literally vibrating with rage. Todd Henderson scrambled out of the passenger side, already dialing his cell phone. "Mitchell!" Brenda shrieked, her voice echoing through the trees. She marched up to the gate, grabbing the steel bars as if she could tear them open with her bare hands. "What is the meaning of this? Open this gate immediately. You are obstructing a community thoroughfare. I will have you thrown in jail." I stood up slowly, walked over to the gate, and leaned against my side of it. "Afternoon, Brenda," I said pleasantly. "Nice blazer. Unfortunately, you're trespassing on my driveway. I'm going to have to ask you to turn your vehicle around." "Your driveway?" Brenda screamed, spittle flying from her lips. "This is HOA property. We paved this. We maintain it. You are interfering with the Memorial Day Gala. We have caterers stuck in this line." "Well, Brenda, you should probably notify the caterers that they're going to need a helicopter," I said, pulling a folded copy of the official county survey out of my back pocket. I slipped it through the bars. "As you can see by this registered survey, this asphalt sits right in the middle of Tract 42. You have no easement. You have no right-of-way. You've been trespassing for 20 years. Brenda snatched the paper, her eyes scanning it frantically. Todd peered over her shoulder. I watched the exact moment the reality of the situation hit them. The blood completely drained from Brenda's face. The red-hot anger was instantly replaced by a stark, horrifying panic. "No," Brenda stammered, stepping back. "No, this is a forgery. This is a fake map. Todd, call the police. Call them right now." "Already on it, Brenda," Todd said, trying to sound tough, though his voice cracked slightly. 10 minutes later, Sheriff's Deputy Miller, the exact same deputy who had refused to stop the towing of Kevin's truck, pulled up with his lights flashing. He waded through the angry mob of homeowners and approached the gate. All right, settle down," Deputy Miller barked. He looked at the massive steel gate, then at me. "Mr. Mitchell, care to explain why you've blockaded the road?" "It's my property, Deputy," I said, handing him my own copy of the survey and a letter drafted by Martin Ross. "Here is the registered land survey completed this week. Here is a letter from my attorney outlining the boundary lines. There is no easement. This road was illegally paved on my land by the developers. I am simply securing my property borders." Deputy Miller read the paperwork carefully. He looked at the bright orange stakes Wayne had driven into the ground, clearly marking the boundary line just inches from Brenda's Lexus. He sighed, folding the papers and handing them back to me. He turned to Brenda. "Mrs. Carmichael," the deputy said tiredly, "these documents look entirely in order. This is his land." "Arrest him," Brenda shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "He is holding our clubhouse hostage. We have a 400-person party starting in 2 hours. He is ruining the neighborhood." "Ma'am, I can't arrest a man for putting a fence on his own land," Deputy Miller said, his tone hardening. "In fact, since he's clearly marked it as private property, you all are currently trespassing. I suggest you turn these vehicles around and clear the area." "Turn around and go where?" Todd yelled, gesturing wildly at the line of cars. "This is the only road to the clubhouse. The other side is blocked by concrete blocks. How are we supposed to get to the marina?" I looked at Todd, smiled my widest smile, and delivered the line I had been practicing in my head all week. "I hear the swamp is lovely this time of year." Memorial Day weekend was an unmitigated disaster for the Whisper Lake Estates Homeowners Association. The news of my barricade spread through the community like wildfire, turning the usually festive holiday into a bitter, chaotic gridlock. Caterers driving box trucks full of prime rib and expensive champagne were forced to reverse half a mile up the winding county road because there was nowhere to turn around. The highly anticipated fireworks display was canceled because the pyrotechnic company could not access the marina dock. The multi-million-dollar clubhouse, with its pristine infinity pool and catered dining hall, sat completely abandoned, utterly useless to the furious residents who had paid thousands of dollars in annual dues for the privilege of using it. I spent the entire 3-day weekend sitting on my porch, drinking coffee, and watching the endless parade of angry golf carts arrive at my bright yellow gate, stare at the concrete barriers, and begrudgingly turn around. It was incredibly peaceful, but I knew the real war was just beginning. On Tuesday morning, exactly at 9 a.m., Martin Ross called me. His voice crackled with energy over the line. "Greg, pack a suit and get down to the county courthouse," Martin instructed. "Brenda's legal team just filed for an emergency temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction. They are trying to force a judge to mandate the immediate reopening of the road, claiming that your gate constitutes a severe safety hazard and an illegal disruption of their established community transit." "Do they have a chance of winning?" I asked, grabbing my keys. "Only if we let them control the narrative," Martin replied confidently. "I've been digging through the county archives all weekend. I found something massive. Just get down here." When I walked into courtroom 3B, the tension was thick enough to cut with a chainsaw. Brenda Carmichael was sitting at the plaintiff's table, wearing a stark crimson dress that matched her flushed, furious complexion. Todd Henderson sat beside her, constantly whispering into her ear while glaring daggers at me. They had hired a high-priced corporate litigation firm from Raleigh, evidenced by the 3 lawyers in sharp, tailored suits, furiously reviewing stacks of binders. Judge Walter Harrison, an older, stern-faced magistrate who had zero patience for neighborhood drama, slammed his gavel and called the hearing to order. The lead attorney for the HOA, a slick man named Peter Rollins, stood up and immediately launched into a dramatic, impassioned speech. He painted me as a rogue, malicious squatter who had arbitrarily blocked a vital community artery. He argued that the road had been used continuously since 1998, which absolutely entitled the HOA to a prescriptive easement under state law. "Your Honor," Peter declared, adjusting his tie, "Mr. Mitchell's reckless actions have not only destroyed a community event, but they also endanger the lives of hundreds of residents by blocking emergency vehicle access to the clubhouse and the lakefront. We respectfully demand that this court order the immediate removal of the barricades pending a full trial." Judge Harrison looked over his spectacles at Martin. "Counselor, your client has taken a rather extreme measure. What is your defense for unilaterally barricading a paved thoroughfare?" Martin stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. He didn't carry a binder, just a single manila folder. "Your Honor," Martin began, his voice calm and resonant. "To claim an easement by prescription, the plaintiff must prove that their use of the land was open, notorious, and hostile for a period of 20 years. But there is a crucial exception to this rule. An entity cannot claim a prescriptive easement if the original use of the land was permitted through active, deliberate fraud." Brenda visibly stiffened in her chair. Her slick attorney, Peter, frowned. "Objection, Your Honor. Opposing counsel is throwing around baseless accusations of fraud." "I have the basis right here," Martin countered smoothly, opening the manila folder. "Your Honor, in 1997, the original development company for Whisper Lake Estates submitted an environmental impact study to the county to build an access road through the northern swamp. The county denied the permit due to protected wetlands. Facing a multi-million-dollar delay, the developers needed a shortcut. Martin walked over to the clerk and handed over a stack of documents. I present a series of internal memos from the defunct development company, subpoenaed during their 2008 bankruptcy proceedings. Martin continued. The developers intentionally paved the road across Tract 42, which was owned by the late Henry Jenkins. They knew it was private property. They deliberately bypassed the surveyor's lines to save money. That is irrelevant to the current HOA's usage, Peter argued forcefully. It is highly relevant, Martin snapped back, turning to look directly at Brenda, because the chief financial officer of that corrupt development company in 1997 was a man named Arthur Carmichael, Brenda Carmichael's late husband. The courtroom erupted into frantic whispers. Brenda's face went completely pale. Todd looked at her in absolute shock, clearly unaware of this connection. Martin pressed his advantage, leaning heavily on the podium. Mrs. Carmichael was a silent partner in her husband's firm. She knew, for 25 years, that the multi-million-dollar road servicing her pristine community was built illegally on stolen land. When my client purchased the property, she tried to force him into the HOA to subject him to their jurisdiction, hoping to silently absorb the stolen land into their legal boundaries. When extortion failed, she tried to tow his family's vehicles. My client did not barricade a community road, Your Honor. He built a fence to protect himself from an organized, ongoing criminal trespass. Judge Harrison spent 10 agonizing minutes reading through the documents Martin had provided. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, the judge took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at Brenda with an expression of sheer disgust. Mrs. Carmichael, Judge Harrison said, his voice dropping an octave, is it true that you were aware this road was paved outside the legal boundaries of the HOA? Brenda opened her mouth to speak, but her expensive lawyer quickly placed a hand on her arm, silencing her. Your Honor, my client's past affiliations have no bearing on the current legal status of the HOA's property rights, Peter deflected nervously. It has every bearing on my decision to grant an emergency injunction, Judge Harrison barked, slamming his hand on the desk. The court does not reward deceit. The HOA does not own the land. They do not have a recorded easement. And given the evidence of intentional encroachment, I am denying the request for a temporary restraining order. Furthermore, I am issuing a formal warning to the plaintiff. If any member of the Whisper Lake Estates HOA attempts to bypass, tamper with, or remove the gate on Mr. Mitchell's property, they will be arrested for criminal trespassing and destruction of private property. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Motion denied. Court is adjourned. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Martin turned to me with a triumphant smirk. We had won the battle. Now, it was time to win the war. The fallout from the hearing was instantaneous and devastating for the HOA. Without access to the road, the clubhouse and marina effectively ceased to exist. June arrived, bringing the oppressive southern heat. Because the maintenance crews driving large utility trucks couldn't get past my concrete barriers, the daily upkeep of the clubhouse halted completely. Within 3 weeks, the pristine, Olympic-sized infinity pool turned a thick, putrid shade of algae green. The manicured lawns grew wild and unruly. The trash bins behind the catering hall, still full of rotting food from the canceled Memorial Day event, began to attract swarms of flies and local raccoons. The residents of Whisper Lake Estates were absolutely furious, and they aimed all their rage directly at Brenda. A faction of angry homeowners, led by a ruthless, no-nonsense corporate consultant named Sylvia Patterson, organized an emergency recall election. They discovered that Brenda had secretly authorized the payment of her expensive Raleigh legal team using the community's emergency roof repair fund. It was the final nail in her coffin. During a chaotic town hall meeting held in a local high school gymnasium because they couldn't use their own clubhouse, Brenda and Todd were unceremoniously ousted from the board. The very next morning, Sylvia Patterson marched down my gravel driveway, alone, carrying a white envelope. She didn't have a golf cart. She walked. I was on my porch, sanding down a rocking chair. I watched her approach. She didn't look angry. She looked utterly exhausted. Mr. Mitchell, Sylvia said, stopping at the bottom of my porch steps. My name is Sylvia Patterson. I am the new president of the Whisper Lake Estates Homeowners Association. and I am here to formally surrender." I put down my sandpaper and offered her a seat. She handed me the white envelope. Inside was a certified cashier's check for $4,650. "That covers the cost of your brother's towing fee, your entire legal retainer with Martin Ross, and a formal apology from the community," Sylvia explained, folding her hands in her lap. "Brenda is gone. Todd is gone. We are currently auditing the books to figure out exactly how much damage they did. But right now, my primary concern is saving our neighborhood's property values. That green pool is sinking our equity by the hour. We need that road open, Greg. What is it going to take?" I looked at the check. It was a good start. But I hadn't gone through weeks of harassment, towing, and legal threats just to break even. "Sylvia, I appreciate the gesture," I said slowly. "But that road takes up nearly a full acre of my land. Land I own free and clear. If you want it back, you're going to have to buy it from me. Properly. We are prepared to negotiate an easement," Sylvia said quickly. "We can offer you $10,000 for a permanent right-of-way." I laughed out loud. "10,000? Sylvia, building a new road through the northern swamp will require 3 years of environmental impact studies, state permits, and over $2 million in construction costs. I know exactly how much that shortcut is worth to you." Sylvia sighed, rubbing her temples. "Okay. Give me your terms. I'll take them back to the board tonight." I had already discussed this exact scenario with Martin. I pulled a typed document from my back pocket and slid it across the table to her. "Here are my demands," I said, pointing to the bulleted list. 1. The HOA will formally, legally sever Tract 42 from all community maps, rendering me permanently immune to any future CC&Rs, dues, or board oversight. 2. You will erect a privacy fence along the eastern border of my property, completely shielding my cabin from the road. 3. You will pay me a one-time, lump sum purchase price of $1.2 million for the deed to that single acre of land containing the road." Sylvia's jaw dropped. She stared at the paper as if it were written in an alien language. $1.2 million? Greg, that's extortion. We don't have that kind of liquid cash in the reserves. "Then you'd better levy a special assessment," I replied coldly, leaning back in my chair. "Divide it up among your 200 homeowners. That's $6,000 a house. Consider it an idiot tax for letting Brenda run your neighborhood into the ground." "Those are my terms, Sylvia. They are non-negotiable. You have exactly 1 week to accept, or I am renting an excavator and tearing the asphalt up to plant a vegetable garden." Sylvia left in a daze. I knew I had them cornered. Their multi-million-dollar clubhouse, their marina, their pristine neighborhood image, it all hinged on my piece of asphalt. The neighborhood went into absolute meltdown over the special assessment. The private Facebook group descended into a digital civil war. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Some threatened to move, only to realize nobody would buy a lake house in a community that didn't have a road to the lake. Ultimately, pragmatism won out over pride. 6 days later, Martin Ross called me with the good news. The HOA board had voted unanimously to accept my terms. They levied the special assessment, taking out a massive commercial bridge loan to pay me immediately while they collected the funds from the angry residents. We closed the deal 3 weeks later in Martin's office. Sylvia signed the massive stack of paperwork with a look of defeated resignation. I handed over the keys to the heavy master lock on the yellow gate. The second the ink dried, the cash hit my bank account. I kept my promise. I let them keep their road. The fencing company came out and erected a beautiful, 8-foot-tall cedar privacy fence along the edge of the asphalt, completely hiding the endless stream of golf carts from my view. The HOA finally got their catering trucks back. The pool was drained and scrubbed, and the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. But things were different now. I paid off my cabin completely. I bought a brand new pontoon boat and docked it at my private, unrestricted slip. I painted my front door an incredibly obnoxious, vibrant shade of neon orange just because I could. And sometimes, when I sit on my porch in the evening, listening to the crickets and watching the sunset over the water, I'll hear a golf cart drive past the other side of my massive cedar fence. I'll smile, take a sip of my coffee, and take deep comfort in the fact that every single time they drive down that road, they know exactly who beat them. If you loved this crazy story of absolute revenge against an out-of-control HOA, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe. Have you ever dealt with a nightmare neighborhood association like Brenda and Todd? Let me know your craziest stories down in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with your friends to spread the satisfaction. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss another epic real-life drama. Thanks for watching, and stay petty, everyone.